Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me. I am still Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com. It is still in the description below. It is your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any of our platforms. Please reach out to me directly. I am Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for pricing. Today we are discussing the latest version of the Patek Philippe Nautilus annual calendar. This is the 5726/1A-014. Now this version with the blue gradient dial came out in 2019, but the example you see right here features a running change since then, which is the new clasp. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. The watch dimensionally has not changed. In stainless steel, 40.5 millimeters in diameter by 11.5 millimeters thick. There are two ways to measure this. We just measure the case, then it's going to be 45.2 millimeters across the wrist. But you can see that there's some stiffness to the bracelet. So we measure from each outboard link, the first outboard link to its opposite number, and we get a more representative measurement of 51.1 millimeters across the wrist. Now, out of the hand and onto the wrist, we'll throw it on my wrist, which is 16 centimeters in circumference, and you can see how it wears. It's a substantial watch, but it's not huge. It's not oversized. We're not in Royal Oak offshore territory. If you can wear a 40 millimeter integrated solid end-link bracelet Rolex watch, something like a Daytona on an Oyster or a GMT on an Oyster, you can wear this just fine. I would even compare it favorably to the new 41 millimeter Submariner. And because it does feature a sloped case flank and a sort of conical bezel profile, it will slide underneath the cuff. It's not quite that thick that it would impede a sleeve of any kind. And I should also mention that this is an all-arounder, being well-loomed, automatic, stainless steel, water resistant to 120 meters. You could absolutely wear this full time. Now, how does it compare to a 5711 or a 5811 or a 5712? Well, it's definitely chunkier. I think if you're talking about a 5726, a 5980 chronograph, or a 5990 travel time Nautilus chronograph, you're looking at something that feels more like an offshore. So this is like the offshore to the 5811 or 5711, the way a Royal Oak is the offshore relative to the standard Royal Oak. So consider this something of a Nautilus offshore proportionally and dimensionally. There's also a substance to the bracelet. Just as the watch feels meatier, the bracelet feels stronger. Like there's more metal here, there's more meat on the bone, so to speak. And that doesn't in any way mitigate against, or I should say militate against, the finishing quality. It is a beautifully finished watch, and the way these bracelets are made remains absolutely spellbinding. The bars that hold them together are completely invisible when viewed in profile, but those bars are inserted and then they're sort of burnished in and satinated down so you can't see them in profile. Removable links are fixed by pins and sleeves, and Patek has a specific reason for that. It's that it doesn't want small screws to strip out inside the links and leave the links stranded, so they've gone with pins and sleeves. If you want to size it, you'll need a block and a punch, but you will not risk stripping them out. There's a beautiful integration of bracelet into case into lugs, and they flow smoothly in a fluid curve down toward the clasp. When Gerald Genta designed the first Nautilus 3700 back in 1976, he was the height of his powers, not just as a watch designer, but as a jewelry designer, his preferred métier, and that's how he always envisioned himself. So the Royal Oak, the Ingenieur SL for IWC, and the Nautilus all envisioned as essentially a bracelet for a man that happens to include a timepiece. And you can see the complexity of the finishing on the case with these micro-beveled satin surfaces in contrast, multi-piece construction, and many facets. And you can see why the Nautilus has always been the senior sports watch over the Aquanaut. It's not just that it natively has a bracelet and the Aquanaut doesn't. It's that the Nautilus is just a much more complicated job to assemble and finish. So there's more sophistication to it. Now we taper down towards the clasp, which has changed. You can see that there's a little button I can push, and by unlatching the internal part of the anchor to the clasp, I can move it back and forth about 1.5 millimeters, and I have one of those on each side. Now this is an all-new feature. It's been filtering out for the last 2 model years, and it gives the watch a little bit more added value. Now it just makes it an easier watch in case you are in between sizes with the removable links. Now we have these little Calatrava cross stumps inside the clasp, which is a twin fold with twin trigger action. It's no longer the clamshell lock that it was before. You can see the entire Calatrava cross here. Again on the rotor and again on the crown, it is the logo of the manufacturer. Adjustments to the annual calendar are rendered using little pusher adjusters on the flanks. And the watch does have a screw-down crown. It is 120 meters water resistant. It has a dial with white gold hands and indices, the better to avoid oxidation or tarnish over time. I'm going to turn the lights off so you can see this watch is quite well loomed. Absolutely no comprehension issues in the dark. It is an annual calendar, which was created by Patek Philippe in 1996 for the 5035. It is their invention. It requires only one correction per year annually during the jump from February to March. The dial is a blue gradient that's a little bit more dramatic than what you'd find on a 5711. There's more of a bright silver blue at the center, and overall I would say that the blue, regardless of which portion of the dial we're talking about, it's a little bit more saturated and intense than on a 5711. We have a coaxial Moonphase and 24-hour display, whereas the annual calendar requires only one correction a year. The Moonphase actually has 122-year accuracy, so you only need to reset it once every 122 years. So we have an aperture-style calendar where we have a day, a date, and a month. And then we have a 24-hour display. So, for example, are we approaching 3 a.m. or 3 p.m.? Well, you can see the little stub hand is near 15, so we are approaching 3 p.m. That's important because you don't want to set the calendar during the nighttime hours. Just in general, it's good to stay away from calendar corrections using pushers. Between 8 p.m. and 4 a.m., you could usually never go wrong with any watch if you adopt that guideline. Now on the reverse side, not a whole lot has changed. We still have a caliber 324 automatic base. It's a 45-hour power reserve with unidirectional winding action and ceramic rotor bearings for improved efficiency, 6-position adjustment, free-sprung Gyromax style balance, anti-magnetic Spiromax hairspring, the Patek Philippe seal guaranteed to run no worse than -3 + 2 seconds per day from the factory. It is a good-looking movement, and while it is well-traveled, it is also still quite elite, with a finishing quality that's up there with the best in series production watches. And you can see that it still nicely fills this display case back. It doesn't in any way seem undersized. We have circular stripes on the rotor, linear stripes on the bridges, engine turning on the base plate, as well as on the center of the rotor and the click wheel for the winding system. You can see the little posts that help to locate the bridges on the base plate have been polished on their top. All screw and jewel sinks have been internally beveled. We have beautiful mirrored bevels on the bridges. They're started mechanically, but they're finished manually, probably with a drill bit buffer tool done by hand to give it a nice mirrored shine as opposed to a machined bevel, and then nice solarization or sun ray on the barrel cover. All in all, a very good looking movement that lives up to the legend of Patek Philippe. 4 hertz beat rate, quite accurate, and an annual calendar complication with Moonphase. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.